Look at the weather.
It's beautiful here.
Non-stop rain.
Oh, man, it is a blazer out there.
It's cold and it's shivery.
It is cold.
Really coming down here.
I really enjoy your weather reports.
From the All Indiana Podcast Network, we're talking weather in a whole new way. From historical events to what's coming up, plus weather news, science, safety, fun facts, and more.
I like where this is going.
This is Weather Weekly. Weather Weekly with Wish TV Storm Track 8 meteorologist Marcus Bailey.
Episode number 47. Good to be with you here on Weather Weekly. I am meteorologist Marcus Bailey with Wish TV in Indianapolis. It's good to be with you. Thank you for being patient here as we kick off the new year. Had a couple of weeks off, and the reason why is we got sick at the Bailey household over the last couple of weeks, so it's been kind of a slow recovery. Here was off work for a few days, and then last week we were back, but the energy level was not there. So we took a couple of weeks off, but we are back at it. Good to be back as well. We are back and healthy. Everybody good. Both my wife and I were the ones that were sick. Kids never got sick, so we're in good shape and back on the up and up. And good to be here with you in 2022 as we kick off another year of the podcast here, and we're excited for it. Kind of get to the weather headlines briefly, and then obviously there's not a lot to talk about locally. We did get a little bit of snow over this past weekend. Wasn't much. I think officially we picked up 3/10 of an inch of snowfall in Indianapolis. It was nice to wake up to at least a little bit of snow Saturday morning. It's taken my my middle child to basketball for playoff basketball, and yeah, a little bit of snow. I had to take it a little bit slow, but man, it wasn't a lot. Certainly wasn't enough for the kiddos to play with. And so the snow drought continues, which it's interesting here. We're kind of getting into, we are in uncharted water a little bit. If you want to go back to December 1st, which is the beginning of meteorological winter, it doesn't officially start the snow season. In fact, if you want to go in November, we actually had a little bit of snow, so we're up to 0.8. We're still less than an inch for the entire snow season. But just to keep records clean, since December 1st, we only had a trace of snow in December. We've only had 3/10 for the month of January. It puts us in third least amount of snow in that time frame. So that's from December 1st to when I'm recording this here. This is January 17th. January 18th, I should say. I'm recording this on a Tuesday. So it's been pretty impressive. I think it's also worth noting that only 6 times in recorded history, so this dates back to the late 1800s, have we had less than 1 inch of snowfall to date. So basically from the 1st of December through the middle parts of January. And you got to keep in mind here, gang. Now, obviously, we can get snow well into March and sometimes even into early April. But in terms of winter bookkeeping and record keeping here, we're halfway through the winter season, right? So we only have the back half of January and then all of February, and then we start flipping the script to spring once you hit March 1st. So, and again, and you think back to some of the podcasts that we've talked about, specifically with Mike Ryan when he gave his winter weather forecast, that we've started to see this trend of less snow in December, maybe a little bit more snow in March. We'll see if that ends up being the case here. But I'll tell you, in this forecast coming up at the end of the podcast, there's just not much. There's not much. Pattern doesn't remain real active around us. It does get colder, and that's one of the ingredients that we sorely lacked in the month of December. But yeah, we'll see. We'll keep an eye on that, but that's really the main headline locally is just the lack of snow that we've had. It's been quite impressive and looks to continue here for some time. Internationally speaking, well, I guess we could go nationally. We've had a lot of areas picking up on snow. I find it fascinating. You talk about our lack of snow. There's places in South Carolina, North Carolina that have picked up now officially more snow than us. Northern Alabama, Northern Georgia. Nashville, Tennessee officially has much more snow than we've had this winter. I showed it on air this morning, but there's a huge, if you look at the snow coverage as of today, again, Tuesday the 18th, there are several inches of snow in Illinois, Michigan, Ohio, Kentucky, so completely surrounding our state. And outside of northern Indiana, along the Indiana Toll Road, due to some lake effect snow showers. There is no snow on the ground, or very limited. It's very patchy, and that came from what we had over the weekend on Saturday. So that's kind of the national headline. The active pattern, the winter pattern, continues. In fact, there looks to be another system maybe coming late week that could dump more snow on the eastern seaboard and up toward New England again. And they're just now kind of shoveling out some of the snow that they had to deal with from the Carolinas all the way up to New England with this last system. And looks like they may have another system coming their way later this week. So we'll keep an eye on that. The big international story, and this isn't necessarily weather related, but it is science related. And so I think it's worth a mention, is just the unbelievable, devastating images that have been coming out from the island of Tonga with that underwater volcano that erupted on Saturday. And unfortunately, it has been fatal. But it just shows how powerful those things can be. This was underwater, but just the plume of ash. If you haven't seen the satellite images, they are just unreal. The amount of force that this volcano spews out, this volcanic ash out of the water, and it just completely engulfs the small island of Tonga. And now, as of this morning, there have been some images, just devastating images, that came out from the New Zealand Defense Force, where it's one of those that you can kind of scrub over kind of the before and after, and it's just the entire island is covered in soot and ash and just unbelievably devastating. And so you got to feel for those people there. Communication is sporadic at best. It just shows the heavy ash that's just over the entire island, though. Even the beaches weren't spared. It's pretty devastating. So if you're not real familiar with where Tonga is at, it's in the Pacific, kind of out in the region. It's east of Australia, north of New Zealand. It is kind of out in the middle of nowhere. There's several islands that you may be more familiar with. Fiji, one of those. Vanuatu, Samoa, American Samoa are all out there. But look, this thing was so powerful that it did produce waves. Tsunamis and tsunami warnings that were included for obviously Australia, New Zealand, all of those islands I previously mentioned, Japan, which is way north, and even Canada, Alaska, and then the lower 48 states of the U.S. included in tsunami warnings, Ecuador, Peru, and Chile in South America. And while there weren't any devastating effects in terms of tsunamis, there were reports along the Washington and Oregon coastline of higher than normal waves. So just, again, shows the power of that volcanic eruption there. So potentially, they're still doing some research, but potentially could be the strongest volcanic eruption in 30 years. So something worth watching here over the next couple of days is aid is trying to get in. Another limiting factor of trying to get aid there because they're worried about, obviously, water contamination with all the ash and now food security. People being able to get fresh food and eat. They're trying to fly in from New Zealand, but because the runways at the airport in Tonga are just completely covered in soot, it's unsafe right now. So they're having a real tough time trying to get to those people, unfortunately. So definitely a story you're going to want to keep updated on. All right, I know we're a couple weeks late. I did want to kind of do a brief review of 2021 weather-wise and kind of look ahead to the rest of the month of January as well and look at some important dates as we typically do in the beginning of the month. I know, again, it's not the beginning of the month, but we're going to treat it like that. And look ahead to this new year as we gear up for 2022 in the weather world here in central Indiana. That's coming up next here on Weather Weekly.
Audible's romance collection has something to satisfy every side of you. When it comes to what kind of romance you're into, you don't have to choose just one. Fancy a dalliance with a duke, or maybe a steamy billionaire. You could find a book boyfriend in the city and another one tearing it up on the hockey field. And if nothing on this earth satisfies, you can always find love in another realm. Discover modern rom-coms from authors like Lily Chu and Ali Hazelwood, the latest romantasy series from Sarah J. Maas and Rebecca Yarros, plus Regency favorites like Bridgerton and Outlander. And of course, all the really steamy stuff. Your first great love story is free when you sign up for a free 30-day trial at audible.com/Wondery. That's audible.com/Wondery.
It is episode number 47. Thanks for joining us here. Usually, the first one of the month, we always talk about the month ahead. Well, we do a little recap, too. I know we're in the middle of the month because I was out the last couple of weeks, but I still want to hit up on a couple of key things. Namely, first, kind of a quick 2021 year in review. The National Weather Service in Indianapolis kind of puts these together. They do it monthly, but they also have an annual kind of summary as well. So I wanted to briefly just kind of touch on that. There were some interesting notes, I think, that are worth mentioning here. Average temperature for the entire year, 54.8. That is 1.1 degree warmer than average. It does rank as the 15th warmest on record. We picked up 49.75 inches of total precipitation. That's on the plus end of 6.12 inches. It's good for the 17th wettest. And 22.2 inches of snow. That is down about 3.3 inches and ranks for the 69th least snowiest. So that kind of puts us right in the middle a little bit there. So not bad on snow. Of course, we had a real big one right around President's Day last year that kind of helped tip the scales a little bit. Otherwise, probably would have been kind of a bleak winter if you didn't have that real big one there. A couple of other highlights here. The date of the final spring frost was May 10th, and the date of final measurable snow was April 20th at 2 inches of snow. Highest max temperature, 94. We did it twice, August 12th and August 24th. We had another summer where we failed to reach 100 degrees. Lowest minimum temperature was 0, so we actually had no days with sub-zero air temperatures. That was February 7th. Lowest maximum temperature was 16 degrees. That was on February 15th. And that was when we got the big snow, by the way. So that snow kind of yanking down those temperatures. Highest minimum temperature was 75. Ooh, did it twice. August 10th and August 11th. Greatest daily rainfall was 2.78 inches on July 1st. Greatest daily snowfall was that big system, February 15th. It was kind of a 2-day system. The bigger of the two, 6.8 inches of snowfall. Longest period held below freezing was 14 days, February 6th through 19th. And longest period with highs of 90 or higher was 4 days in a row. August 21st through the 24th. We did it twice, again in late August, through the 26th and the 29th. Another record of note, we had a few daily snowfall records during the winter months, a few daily precip records as well, but one that was interesting here, December, the count of days above 60 degrees, we had 11 of them. That breaks the previous record of 10 set back in 1889. So one of the warmer, I think it was, if I remember correctly, top 5 warmest December on record. So that's kind of a brief recap of 2021. Now, looking ahead to this month here, as we typically do in the beginning of the month, we usually kind of look at some important dates on this day in history. Again, you can find that on the National Weather Service page in Indianapolis. And I've got some thoughts on a couple of them here, but we'll just kind of briefly go through a few that were interesting. We won't get through all of them. January 1st, 1864, Indianapolis, a bitter cold day greets the new year with a low temperature of -20 and a high only of -12. On the 2nd in 1887 at Lafayette, the coldest temperature recorded for the state in the 19th century is set at minus 33. It wasn't the coldest temperature overall. That happens a little bit later. I'll talk about that. On January 5th, this is the one I want to spend some time on. 2005 at Muncie, an ice storm leaves most of the city without power. Parts of the city do not have power for days. So, quick story, as many of you know if you've been listening to this podcast for a long time, I grew up in Muncie. I went to Ball State, so I spent a good portion of my youth and beyond up in Delaware County. So 2005, that January, I was going into the last semester of my senior year at Ball State University. I also was employed at the time, Backyard Broadcasting. It's now known as Woof Boom Radio. I think we had just recently merged with the other powerhouse Muncie station. So when I started working in the station's located in Daleville, so we just referred to it as Daleville. At that time, and when I started my senior year of high school, so that was 4 years prior, that you had Max FM, which was simulcast on 93.5 and 96.7. I believe those are split now. They're still owned, but it's two different radio stations. WERK, which is 104.9 FM, and back then it was an oldies station. It was also simulcast on 101.7. I think that frequency has since been sold. And then 1240 WHBU, which is the AM talk station for Anderson and basically for Madison County. That's talk of Madison County. Then later, as we got into, I believe it was either 04 or 05, Backyard Broadcasting then also purchased WLBC, which is kind of the flamethrower out of Muncie, 104.1. So there was a lot of time I spent time back and forth. They were in separate buildings. And so I spent a lot of time kind of board hopping for both, doing a little bit of DJing for both as well. So on that date, January 5th, I believe I was I think I was board hopping for a college basketball game, may have been Purdue, could have been IU. We were an affiliate station, so that basically meant that, every other break, one was a network break and another one was a local break. So I'd have to run the local commercials when they called for them. So basically, I just kind of sat around, waited for the out cue and that, and then I'd log it to prove that we indeed aired that. So we kind of knew that there was going to be some nasty weather, so they had some staff around. But it was a busy night. I believe there was 3 of us that were on staff that night. And I don't remember who the third person was, but I do know it was myself and Wade Stokes, who was another part-time board op. Been there for many years. I think he's still doing it now. And we got to a point in the evening where the parking lot and the cars were just a sheet of ice. Our building was kind of located in the middle of the country. Basically, it was surrounded by cornfields, but we weren't super far away from civilization. We were only about a mile or 2 away from the State Road 67 and I-69 interchange. So you could see a lot of the lights from around that exit. There's a lot of fast food restaurants and gas stations, truck stop, that kind of thing. It's the first Muncie exit if you're coming out from Indianapolis, for those of you that are kind of familiar with that area. So State Road 67 was maybe like a half a mile from us, and we were off on a county road just south of there. So we knew things were kind of getting ugly because there was a stoplight at that county road that we were located on, and in State Road 67 crossroads. And the light had gone out, so the power was obviously out. We had not lost power. To my knowledge, I don't think we had like full-on backup generator for the building. So we knew that there was also a nasty accident at that intersection because there were several emergency lights there. And Wade kept calling me out and saying, "Hey, dude, check this out." And at one point, after we were starting to field some phone calls about numerous weather closings for that night. A lot of basketball games. Obviously, you're kind of by the 5th, there were a lot of kids that were going back to school. So there were boys and girls, JV and varsity games that were going, basketball. A lot of those were getting canceled. There was already cancellations for the next day going on. So our boss was calling in saying, hey, make sure you kind of get these on the air if you can. So we were jumping on air in some of these commercial breaks and jumping on some of the other stations just to update and whatnot. So Wade calls me out, and then he's like, dude, you need to check this out. And you're seeing some of these flashes of light on the horizon. You're hearing some kind of like faint pops. Didn't really sound like thunder, so it was kind of weird. And so Wade's like, man, is that thunder? And we both kind of looked at each other, and after watching for a while, we both knew it wasn't. And considering that we're starting to see power go out in a lot of spots, we both concluded and knew that it was transformers blowing. I think I should add, too, that it wasn't just an immense amount of ice that we got. It wasn't, well, I wouldn't even call it immense. I mean, it was I think we got it like up to a quarter on the high end. Which can be devastating by itself. But what really triggered the problems in Muncie was that we had around 30 to 40 mile per hour wind gusts. And so that just was devastating because you've got ice weighing down these power lines, and the stress from the wind alone was causing issues. But then you're getting the ice on these tree limbs and then the wind knocking those down onto power lines. So you are really devastating the infrastructure, on the electric infrastructure, and on the power grid in Muncie. And so this wasn't going to be just a short term, like we're going to be out without power for a couple of hours. Now you're looking at several days because you've got power lines that are completely down. They're snapped. Some of the poles were completely brought down because of the weight of the tree and the ice and all. It was a mess. It was a mess. I also remember getting called in, helping out on WLBC, because WLBC, I believe, at one point then was really the only station in town. I think eventually power was lost in the Daleville stations. So WLBC was really the only kind of station left standing. They had a generator. And so a lot of us were all there and just kind of going on rotations there. I spent a lot of overnights that week. Ball State was still not in school, and they weren't going to be for, I think, the next week or so. And I had lost power to my house off campus, and my mom lived on the northwest side of Muncie. She was without power. So there's really nowhere to go. I do believe my grandparents had power still. So I think my mom they ended up going over there. My aunts and uncles lived out in Yorktown. I don't think they lost power, but basically within the entire city of Muncie, they were without power. So I spent a lot of time at WLBC. And a big reason why, this was like my first kind of significant weather event that I had ever encountered working as a member of the media. And so that was awesome. We had people bringing us food because we were, again, no one could watch any of the Indianapolis television stations. And you have to keep in mind, this was not nearly as bad in Indianapolis. I had a lot of friends, I remember, that their parents went and just got hotel rooms in Indy because you got outside of Muncie, there was power, and it was like nothing happened. So there were hotel rooms that were filling up basically from Anderson all the way to the northeast side of Indianapolis. So I remember having a few friends' parents that decided just to do that, at least until everything could get resolved, because they knew it was going to be a while before things were fixed in Muncie. So I spent a good portion of overnights at WLBC. I remember there was one night where the generator either failed, or I can't remember exactly what happened, but the boss there, Steve Lindell, the PD, he called me and said, hey, dude, can you come in? I know it's super late. It was like 10 or 11 o'clock at night. I was at my mom's house, and he's like, can you come in and just babysit? He goes, I just want to make sure no one's going to break in, because obviously the security system's not going to work. And two, we need to make sure that we're up and running if the power does come back on. I was like, yeah, sure. So he's like, we'll pay you whatever. So I basically sat in the front lobby. There's no power. It's pitch black. It was very eerie because I'm by myself, and I just kind of had to wait around. And eventually, I think I was there for about 3, maybe 4 hours. The power did come back on, or at least the generator kicked back on. And so I was able to get the computers up and running, and we were able to get some stuff out over the air. I think I had to call one of the engineers and had to kind of walk me through, because it wasn't as simple as power up the computer, play some music, and start talking. There was a lot of steps that had to get done. But we did get back on the air, and I think I was on there for about 2 to 3 hours, still passing along information. Obviously, there were still closings that were coming in because the power was out. And passed the baton to Steve when he did the morning show the next day. So, but I had... a lot of people look badly probably on that because that was such a disaster. But I look fondly on that because, again, that was my first kind of real experience with extended weather coverage. And so that was fun. It kind of gave me the itch even more so to do what we do now. And I've had a couple of significant ice events since then. And I'd say, I mean, I've had several big snow events, but nothing is more devastating than ice. That one was probably the most devastating in terms of the longevity, but even in recent memory, we had a pretty light ice glazing, I believe it was about 5 years ago here in Indianapolis on a Friday night, that turned the interstates and the metro basically into a parking lot. And many people that were out driving Friday night after 9 or 10 o'clock at night were still stuck on the road the next morning at 8 or 9 in the morning. So pretty incredible, and just kind of shows how devastating ice can be, even just a little bit. So I always say on air, I'd rather have 10 inches of snow than even just a thin glaze of ice, because ice is no good. So that's my story about that ice storm. We ended up, by the way, that following Monday, I think that was maybe like 5 days later, that following Monday, classes started at Ball State without a hitch. There were still some areas without power, but for the main portion of Muncie, and if you're familiar with Muncie, Ball State kind of on the western edge or western part of the city, power was back up. So it's like nothing ever happened on campus. Let's see. This is an interesting one here. On the 12th, 1916 in Indianapolis, an Arctic front moved through, taking the temperature from a high of 68 down to a low of 10. This marks the greatest single-day temperature change, 58 degrees in the city's records. The temperature kept dropping the next day, recording a high of 10 and a low of 1 below. On the 13th, in 1976, a tornado damages in the middle of January. Damages homes and outbuildings near Seymour, and an electrical transmission tower is blown down as well, which caused 3 more towers to fall. We'll move on here. Let's see. Oh, here we go. 1994 at New Whiteland. The all-time state record low temperature is set at minus 36 degrees. So another interesting story about this. So I started my elementary career of school at Burris Laboratory School in Muncie. That is connected to Ball State. It's run by Ball State. So it means that we're on schedule with Ball State, meaning Burris was never out of school unless Ball State was out of school, meaning that Burris was never out of school for any weather-related things. My mom remarried back in 94, and we moved to Washington Township in Indianapolis, so that's the north side of Indianapolis. And I went to Northview Middle School, which was right next to North Central High School. Never had missed school for weather, ever. Come downstairs. My mom is watching Daybreak, per usual, and Dave Barris is saying, hey, Washington Township schools are closed. And I'm like, whoa, why? And I'm like looking out the window. There's like no snow on the ground. And Mom's like, it's too cold. I think it was probably like around like minus 29 at our house. So, yeah, we had to end up missing school because of how cold it was that day. So that was the first time I'd ever missed school. Let's see. A couple more here. Find an interesting one here. In 1999, on the 22nd, estimated 70-mile-per-hour thunderstorm winds rips off roofs on an agricultural building just west of Newberry in Greene County. 24th, 1965, a tornado damages several houses and overturns a mobile home in New Market. The 25th, 1990, widespread strong winds caused damage to billboards, roofs, and unsecured items. Peak winds of over 60 miles per hour are recorded in Martinsville and Kokomo. The big one that many of you older folks will remember, that are older than me anyway, the 26th, 1978, the worst blizzard on record hits Indiana on the 25th to the 27th. Up to 20 inches of snowfall in the central and south with 40 inches to the north. Wind gusts of 55 miles per hour cause 10 to 20 foot drifts and wind chills as low as 50 below on the old wind chill scale. A federal state of emergency is declared. That is known as the blizzard, the Great Blizzard of 1978. Have a great podcast we did about a year ago, and we looked back with, wish it would have been an actual real interview with myself, but an interview that Mike Ahern, legendary anchor at Wish TV, did when he is kind of semi-retired here at Wish, and he interviewed Stan Wood. Stan Wood was one of the main weather guys and leading TV weather guys during that storm in 1978 here at Wish TV. So check that out. It's about a year ago. On the 29th, 2008, at Speedway, an EF1 rated tornado strikes Avon. Straight line winds of estimated 100 mile per hour occurred. So that wasn't that long ago. And let's see, 31st, we'll close this up. 1982 in Indianapolis, the record snowfall for the date set is 7.2 inches of snow. So there you go. January, a very interesting month. Obviously, very snow heavy. But there's some severe weather there. There's some very interesting things that have happened in the month of January. Real quick, again, important note, the average high, 36. The average low, 20.9. Average precip, liquid form, 3.12 for the month of January. It is the snowiest month on record at 8.8 inches of snow, which we are nowhere close to getting to right now. In fact, we're only at about 0.3 inches of snow, as we mentioned earlier. So one of the least snowiest Januaries that we've had so far. The question is, will we see? You got to think at some point, like, the bottom's going to drop, right? Because we've had very few instances where we've had less than 1 inch of snow for an entire winter. I know we still have a little ways to go, but still, do we think that the tide will be turning here? Well, we might have some answers for you in the short term in the forecast. That is coming up next here on Weather Weekly. All right, here's a look at your forecast as we roll through the week of January 17th. Actually kind of mild briefly for Tuesday and Wednesday with numbers into the 40s, but Wednesday's a little deceiving as this podcast drops. It's going to be a day of change. Falling temperatures through the day, and believe it or not, we may have a chance for some light snow in the southern third of the state. I don't think we see more than, say, an inch of snowfall, but it's something for those of you that are wanting some snow. That likely comes Wednesday evening after the passage of a cold front in an area of low pressure kind of slides down to our south, or at least south of us, I should say. The rest of the week is quiet, but we're going to get that cold kind of settling in for the rest of the week and really for the long term here. Numbers barely getting out of the teens for highs on Thursday. Looks like we're into the mid-20s then for highs on Friday, and back to the lower 30s for the weekend and into early in the work week Monday and Tuesday. The 8 to 14 day outlook calls for below average temperatures, so that takes us to the end of the month. So it looks like we have flipped the script. However, a really good shot in a bullseye, if you will, over much of Indiana for below average precipitation. So it looks like we may see that snow drought here continue. They haven't updated the 1 month outlook yet because it still says above average precip, and we are obviously seeing that is not holding true. But it does look like we're going to be on the colder side. We've seen some signs of that, and so we feel pretty confident that we're talking about below average temperatures here for the last couple of weeks of January. Hope you can tune in next week here for another episode. We'll get back on the up and up of getting back to weekly podcasts here. If you have anything that you'd like to discuss or have us discuss, you can email me anytime, marcus.bailey@wishtv.com. You can also reach out on social media, on Twitter @MarcusBailey, and on Facebook and Instagram, it's Marcus Bailey Weather. So make sure you check that out. While you're around, make sure you check out all the other great podcasts here on the All Indiana Podcast Network. We'll talk to you next week.
Discover more from Storm Track 8 Weather and Wish TV. Online at wishtv.com and when you follow Wish TV on Facebook. Plus, be sure to check out more great podcasts from the All Indiana Podcast Network now at allindianapodcastnetwork.com.